When my daughter turned 19, I thought letting her borrow my car would be a small gesture of trust, a rite of passage even. She was in college, juggling part-time work, a social life, and all the messy complexities of young adulthood. I remembered being that age, craving freedom, aching for space to figure out who I was outside of my parents' shadow. So when she asked to borrow my car for a weekend trip with friends, I didn't hesitate. I handed over the keys with a smile, a few gentle reminders, and the unspoken hope that she'd treat both the car and my trust with care. What followed, however, wasn't a sweet coming-of-age moment or a lesson in responsibility. It was something else entirely, something that left me staring at an empty driveway days later, grappling with a single word she hurled at me in anger: controlling. I gave her my car. This isn't just a story about a vehicle, it's about boundaries, entitlement, and what happens when a parent finally decides to stop shielding their child from the consequences. Before we start, have you ever had to fight for your own voice? Let's get into it. I was standing at the kitchen sink rinsing out a glass when she asked. Her voice was casual, almost too casual, like she'd rehearsed how not to sound too eager. "Mom, could I borrow the car this weekend?" She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, trying to appear indifferent, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, the silent plea, the expectation. My daughter has always had that look, the one that used to mean scraped knees and sleepover requests. Now it meant something different: independence, escape, a test. It wasn't a difficult request on the surface. The car was mine, yes, but I wasn't using it much that weekend. I had groceries already, errands done, and nowhere urgent to be. And truthfully, I wanted to say yes. Not because I owed her anything, but because it felt good, in a way, to be the kind of mother who trusted her daughter with a car. A mother who wasn't overbearing. A mother who gave space. So I said yes, with the simple condition that she return it Sunday night with gas in the tank. She nodded quickly, said, "Of course," and that was that. Or so I thought. She left Friday afternoon with a duffel bag and a grateful smile. "Thanks, Mom. Seriously, I'll take good care of it." I believed her. I wanted to. I even stood at the window for a moment after she pulled away, watching the car disappear down the road, unaware I was also watching the slow unraveling of a boundary I hadn't realized was already fraying. The weekend was quiet. I busied myself with cleaning out the linen closet, organizing spice jars, and catching up on the kind of TV shows you only watch when you're alone. I didn't expect constant updates. She was 19, not 9. But by Sunday afternoon, I started to feel a small gnawing unease. She hadn't texted once since Friday. "No, we got here safe. No photos, not even a check-in." I brushed it off. She was probably just busy. Or maybe she'd forgotten. These things happen. But by Monday morning, the car wasn't back. No call, no text, just an empty driveway and the rising thrum of anger disguised as concern. I tried calling. No answer. I sent a short text. "Where's the car?" The response came half an hour later. "Sorry. Got back late. We'll drop it off later today." No explanation. No apology. Just a flat, clipped message like I was a loan officer, not her mother. I stared at the screen, feeling a weight I couldn't quite name press into my chest. It wasn't just about the car. It was about what the car had come to represent. My trust, my boundaries, the invisible line between being a parent and being taken for granted. I didn't know it then, but that weekend wasn't the beginning of her independence. It was the beginning of the end of mine. She finally pulled into the driveway late Monday evening, headlights cutting across the dusk, as if announcing her return like a ceremony that had come too late. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to read, but really just listening, waiting. When the engine shut off and the door slammed, I counted the seconds it would take her to come inside. 15, then 30. After a full minute passed, I stood and peeked out the window. She wasn't heading for the front door. She was scrolling through her phone, casually leaned against the car, laughing at something on her screen like she wasn't hours late, like she hadn't left me wondering all weekend if something had gone wrong. Or worse, nothing at all. I opened the door. She looked up, startled for a moment, then pasted on that breezy grin she uses when she knows she's in the wrong, but hopes I won't push. "Hey, Mom," she said, tossing her phone into her oversized purse. "Traffic was crazy coming back. Sorry." "Was it?" I asked, my voice too even, too calm. She picked up on it immediately. Her smile faltered, just a flicker, but I saw it. "I would have called," she added, "but my phone died, and then I forgot. But I'm here now." The lies were sloppy. They didn't even bother to hide themselves properly. She wasn't trying to convince me. Not really. She just didn't want to deal with the fallout. I stepped outside and walked to the car. That's when I noticed it. Fast food wrappers shoved into the side door pocket, my reusable water bottle missing, and the faint, unmistakable smell of something floral and sharp. Not my perfume. Not hers either. When I opened the glove box to check if the registration was still there, I found a crumpled parking ticket. Issued Sunday afternoon. In a part of town she had no business being in. I said nothing right then. Not about the ticket. Not about the garbage. Not even about the fact that the gas tank was hovering just above empty when I'd specifically asked her to refill it. No. I simply closed the door, walked back inside, and left her to trail behind me with that uncomfortable silence beginning to wrap itself around her ankles. It wasn't about the car. Not really. It was about how she treated what didn't belong to her as if it did. About how easily she dismissed my trust like a door left swinging in the wind. About how the word sorry had been reduced to something performative and small. Later that night, she asked if she could use the car again on Wednesday. Said she had a thing for school. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I realized she thought the car was hers too. The miles on that odometer weren't just road distance anymore. They were slowly marking every inch she was pushing past me. Every inch I was letting her. When she asked to borrow the car again, she did it with the same tone a person might use when asking someone to pass the salt at dinner. Routine, expected, casual. Like I was a resource to be scheduled, not a mother with her own plans, her own boundaries. "Just for the weekend, Mom," she said, already scrolling on her phone, her thumb moving at full speed, her attention somewhere else. "We're doing a girls' trip to the lake. Emily's parents have a cabin." I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be noticed. She didn't look up. Didn't catch the way I hesitated, the way the word no formed in the back of my throat, but never quite found its way forward. I had wanted to say it. I had wanted to look her in the eye and tell her that no, she couldn't borrow the car again. Not after last time. Not after the forgotten call, the late return, the lies that came dressed up in traffic excuses and dead batteries. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Will you have it back by Sunday night?" She nodded, barely, her focus still glued to the glowing screen in her hand. "Of course. I'll fill up the tank this time too. Promise." The words were so easy for her. Light and fluffy, like popcorn. Tasty, but meaningless. I should have said no. I should have reminded her that the last time she promised something, I was left staring out the window well past dark, wondering when she'd finally show up. I should have talked about the parking ticket she never explained, the perfume that didn't belong, the gas she didn't replace. I should have said a lot of things. But instead, I handed her the keys. There was a flicker of gratitude in her eyes then, quickly replaced by the same assumption I'd seen before. Like the car wasn't mine anymore. Not really. It had become a shared object in her mind, an unspoken extension of her independence, and my permission was more of a formality than a necessity. That weekend, I didn't clean the linen closet. I didn't watch television or organize anything. I sat with the silence, with the absence of the car, the absence of her, and more than anything, the absence of respect that had begun to hollow out the space between us. I didn't call to check in. I didn't text. I didn't ask when she'd be home. I waited. Sunday night came and went. Monday morning, the driveway was still empty. And this time, I didn't feel worry. I felt something else. Something colder. Like the last ember of warmth had finally burned out. She hadn't broken a rule this time. She hadn't lied outright. But she had done something worse. She'd treated my kindness like a given, my patience like a resource she could mine until it ran dry. And that's when I realized it already had. She returned Monday evening again, just as she had the last time, nonchalant, a little smug, smelling faintly of bonfire, and something sweeter underneath, like cheap peach body spray. She didn't bother with a proper explanation. Just a breezy, "Hey, Mom," as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't, once again, left me waiting all Sunday night, wondering if this would be the time I said something real. Something final. I watched her through the kitchen window as she pulled her duffel from the back seat, letting the door slam shut behind her with that teenage finality that said, "You're lucky I even came home." I didn't go out to meet her this time. I didn't ask how the trip went, who had driven, who had drank, who had broken the rules. I sat at the kitchen table instead, sipping tea that had long gone cold, and pretended not to care that she hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't even had the decency to pretend she respected the agreement we'd made. She walked past me on her way upstairs, pausing only to say, "The car's outside. I'll fill it up tomorrow." I nodded but didn't look up. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. That was the first red flag. Not the lateness, not the empty gas tank, not even the lie. It was that she no longer bothered to hide it. The truth had become a burden she didn't feel obligated to carry. The next morning, I went outside before she woke up. I needed to see the car for myself. Needed to understand the quiet knot that had been forming in my stomach since Friday. It sat there in the driveway, like an old friend who'd overstayed their welcome. I opened the door, sat in the driver's seat, and took a deep breath. The smell hit me first. Stale fast food, a faint trace of alcohol, and something floral again. A different perfume this time. Not hers. Not mine. The back seat was a mess. Someone had spilled something sticky on the upholstery. My favorite blanket, the one I always kept folded neatly in the trunk, was balled up under a pair of muddy sneakers. There was an empty wine cooler bottle tucked into the side pocket, like they'd thought better of leaving it in plain view, but not enough to dispose of it altogether. There was no parking ticket this time, but the evidence was worse. Not on paper, but etched into the fabric, into the scent, into the indifference. And still, I didn't confront her. Not then. I cleaned the car, quietly, methodically, like it would somehow scrub away my disappointment. Like if I erased the mess, I could erase the feeling too. That was my mistake. The first red flag wasn't her carelessness. It was my silence. My decision to absorb her disrespect like a sponge, to carry the weight for both of us. I kept telling myself she'd grow out of it. But really, I was letting her grow into it. She came downstairs late, still yawning, her hair in that high, messy bun she always wore when she wanted to look like she hadn't tried, but somehow still had. Her sweatshirt was borrowed, probably Emily's, and her leggings had smudges of dried mud near the ankles. I was sitting at the counter nursing my second cup of coffee, the car keys placed quietly between us like a question neither of us was ready to ask. She reached for a banana, peeled it halfway, then casually said, I'll take the car later this afternoon, put gas in it and get it washed. I didn't have time yesterday. She didn't even look at me when she said it. Just leaned against the fridge, scrolling through something on her phone with the kind of calm confidence only someone certain they won't be challenged can wear. I took a breath, set my mug down gently. I went out to the car this morning, I said, trying to keep my voice level. She paused for a fraction of a second, then nodded slowly, like it wasn't unexpected. Oh, okay. I cleaned it. Now she looked up, eyes narrowing just slightly, calculating. You didn't have to do that, she said. Not an apology, not even close. Just a statement, flat and empty, like my effort was inconvenient. I should have said more then. Should have asked who drank in the car, who wore the perfume, who dragged their muddy shoes across my back seat like it was theirs. I should have asked what kind of lake trip ends with wine bottles tucked into side pockets and someone else's hoodie in the passenger seat. But I didn't. I just looked at her and said, "That's not the point." She sighed, loudly. That long-suffering exhale she always used when she wanted me to know how unreasonable I was being. You're making it a big deal. It's just a car. Just a car. The way she said it made something in me shift. I had bought that car myself after the divorce. Paid it off in full with the first bonus I earned on my own, without her father's help. It had carried me through interviews, road trips, late-night grocery runs, and quiet escapes when the house felt too loud. It had been my first tangible reward for standing on my own 2 feet. And now, in her eyes, it was just a thing to be used and returned, no matter how it looked, or smelled, afterward. She finished her banana and tossed the peel into the trash. Anyway, she said, her tone now edging into annoyance, I'll handle it later. You don't have to stress about it. You're being a little, I don't know, intense. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. You mean controlling? She blinked. A pause. Then, well, yeah. Kinda. There it was, small, careless, but sharp. A lie I'd been hearing in pieces for weeks, finally fully formed. Not about gas, not about perfume, about me, about who I was to her now. Not a mother, just a hurdle. And in that moment, I knew. Something had to change. The envelope was wedged under the sun visor, folded in half and barely tucked in, as if she'd meant to hide it but gave up halfway through. I found it 2 days after our Monday morning conversation, when I went to grab my sunglasses, and instead pulled out the familiar gray slip with bold black lettering. The kind of paper you recognize instantly. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it for a moment, my fingers tightening around the edge, as if maybe by holding it long enough it would vanish, or somehow rewrite the past few weeks. Back in the kitchen, I unfolded the ticket and read the details slowly. Saturday night, 11:47 p.m. A downtown lot known for its bars, not its lakeside cabins. A fine for illegal parking after hours. License plate matched mine. Vehicle description too. There it was, in plain text. Not hearsay, not suspicion. Proof. I sat down, the ticket heavy in my hand, and stared at the floor as if it might offer me answers. So she hadn't been at the lake the whole time. Or maybe not at all. I wasn't sure which part to be angrier about. The lie itself, or the ease with which it had rolled off her tongue. That weekend trip I'd approved without question now felt like a carefully staged story. And I'd bought it, because I wanted to believe she was still the girl I could trust. The girl who said thank you and meant it. The girl who borrowed things with care, who returned what wasn't hers in the same condition, or better. But that girl was fading. Or maybe she'd never existed quite the way I imagined. And it wasn't just the ticket. It was the silence, the casual shrugs, the eye rolls, the belief that she could lie and bend and stretch the truth like warm taffy and that I'd keep smiling and handing over the keys like clockwork. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't wave the ticket in her face or demand answers she'd likely dodge with that same tired grin and another flimsy excuse. I simply placed it on the hall table, right where she'd see it when she got home, and waited. She came in late, as usual, her shoes in hand and makeup half smudged like she'd run out of time to care. When her eyes landed on the paper, she froze. Just for a beat. Then, without a word, she picked it up, turned, and walked upstairs. She never mentioned it. No apology, no explanation. Just silence, as if her silence alone had the power to erase responsibility. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a phase. This wasn't teenage rebellion or growing pains. This was a pattern. A slow erosion of respect, of boundaries, of me. And I had helped build it. Every time I said yes when I should have said no. Every time I cleaned the car without comment. Every time I let a lie go unchecked, I had handed her one more brick in the foundation of this version of herself. Entitled, dismissive, untouchable. And I was done building. It was a Thursday morning when she came into the kitchen and dropped her backpack with a heavy thud by the door. I was already there, sipping my coffee in the quiet, trying to find a piece of peace before the day began. She didn't say good morning, didn't ask how I slept, just reached for the car keys on the hook and tossed out, "I need the car today. I've got an exam and then I'm going to Liam's. I'll probably be back late." Not a question, not a request, a declaration. She didn't even glance at me, just grabbed a granola bar and opened the fridge like we were roommates. Like the car she never paid for and barely took care of belonged to her now by sheer force of habit. I looked at her, really looked. She was 19, but carried herself like she'd already outgrown any need for guidance, like asking permission was beneath her. I set my mug down slowly. "I actually need the car today," I said. "I have a doctor's appointment at 11 and errands after." She froze for half a second, then laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound that didn't belong to the little girl who used to sit at this same table and beg me for pancakes shaped like hearts. "Can't you reschedule? Or Uber?" she asked, already pulling her phone out. "It's not like you're driving to another state or anything." That was the moment. That tiny pause where I felt something harden inside me. The part of me that had been making space for her over and over, stretching myself thin to accommodate her whims, her lateness, her silence, her shifting lies. It just stopped, like a door clicking shut. "I said I need the car," I replied, quietly but firmly. She scoffed, rolled her eyes in that exaggerated way teenagers perfect by 16. "Seriously? You're being dramatic. It's just one day." "No," I said. "It's not just one day. It's every day. And I'm done pretending that handing you the keys doesn't cost me anything." She blinked, surprised not by the words themselves, but by the fact that I had finally said them out loud. The silence between us was thick, edged with something brittle and sharp. For a moment, I thought she might soften, apologize, offer to figure something else out. But she didn't. She crossed her arms and said, "You're always looking for a reason to control me. It's exhausting." And there it was. Control. That word again, flung like a stone at everything I had done in love, in patience, in good faith. Not because I wanted power over her, but because I had been trying, too gently maybe, to teach her what responsibility looks like. She didn't see it. She couldn't. Because somewhere along the way, borrowing turned into entitlement, privilege into presumption, my generosity into her baseline. And I finally realized that the car wasn't the only thing she'd been taking. She had been driving over my boundaries for months, and I had let her. Until now. The rest of that day unfolded in the quiet way tension often does. No shouting, no slammed doors, just the sound of distance settling in. She didn't speak to me after our exchange in the kitchen. She left the house on foot, mumbling something about catching a ride with Emily, slinging her bag over her shoulder with an air of injured pride. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't ask when I'd be home. I watched her go from the front window, her figure growing smaller with each defiant step, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of every time I'd let her drive away without consequence. That evening, she returned, her arms crossed, her lips tight, a storm brewing behind her carefully practiced indifference. "Emily dropped me off," she said, as if I'd been waiting with bated breath. I was in the kitchen again, because where else does a mother end up when trying to process 1,000 little heartbreaks in silence? She stood there for a moment, expecting something, maybe guilt or regret, or some softened plea for peace. I gave her none of it. Instead, I wiped my hands on a towel, looked her in the eye, and said, "I meant what I said this morning." Her eyes rolled before I even finished the sentence. That long, slow arc that has the power to shrink years of parenting into a single, dismissive gesture. It didn't cut like it used to. Not anymore. Not after everything. "God, Mom, you're always making things so dramatic," she muttered, moving past me like I wasn't standing there, like I was just furniture that occasionally talked back. I followed her into the hallway, not to escalate, but to try, one last time, to reach the part of her I believed still remembered who I was, before she decided I was just the woman with the keys. "This isn't about a car," I said gently. "It's about respect. It's about learning that just because something is available doesn't mean it's owed to you." She paused at the bottom of the stairs, half turned. "Are you seriously giving me a lecture right now?" "No," I said. "I'm giving you a warning." That caught her off guard. She blinked, her brows tightening. "A warning?" "Yes," I replied, calm and unwavering. "If you treat things like they don't matter, one day they'll be gone. That includes people too." Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, to spit something back with the sharpness she had become so practiced at wielding. But nothing came. Just that simmering silence teenagers carry when they know they've gone too far, but haven't yet decided if they care. She turned and went upstairs without another word. And I stood in the hallway, my own warning ringing in my ears like an echo that was meant for both of us. Something was shifting between us. Not a crack, but a fault line. And I could feel the quake coming. I didn't know it then, but the next move I made would change everything. It was a Friday evening, and the house felt heavy with the kind of quiet that doesn't soothe. It suffocates. The sun had dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I was folding laundry on the couch, not because it needed to be done that moment, but because the rhythm of folding towels gave me something to focus on, besides the hollow that had opened up between us over the past few weeks. She came in through the back door with her phone in hand, earbuds still tucked into her ears, her voice loud and careless as she finished a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. "No, she's being insane," she said, laughing. "Totally controlling. You know how she is." The word stopped me mid-fold. It sat there in the air like a sharp corner, and I walked right into it. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, towel half folded, watching her toss her shoes off by the door like she hadn't just flung something heavier than any accusation straight into my chest. She saw me too late. Her eyes met mine, just for a second, and I saw it. A flicker of guilt, quickly smothered. She pulled the earbuds out slowly. "Hey," she said, trying for casual. "Didn't know you were in here." "You called me controlling," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. She shrugged, setting her phone down with a little more force than necessary. "I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" She rolled her eyes, sat on the arm of the chair like we were equals having some mild debate about curfews or chores. You don't let me do anything without lecturing me. You make everything into some big life lesson. It's like, I don't know, you don't trust me to make my own decisions. I stared at her. This girl who had borrowed my car, my time, my trust, and had repaid it with lies, entitlement, and now, casual cruelty. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up waiting for her, about the empty gas tank, the parking ticket, the silent apologies that never came. I thought about all the times I gave her space because I believed that's what a good mother did. I trusted you, I said, over and over. You treated that trust like it came with no limits, no cost. But here's the truth. You haven't earned the freedom you think you're owed. Her face shifted. Not angry, not hurt, just blank. So what? You're going to take the car away now? No, I said. I'm thinking of selling it. She blinked, laughed, like I had told a joke. You're not serious. But I was. And she could see it now. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't making threats. I was simply done waiting for respect to show up on its own. If being firm made me controlling in her eyes, so be it. I'd rather be controlling than complicit in raising someone who thought love meant limitless leeway. The towels lay forgotten on the couch, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to finish folding them. It was early Saturday morning when I saw it. I hadn't been looking for it, not really. I was scrolling through my phone at the kitchen table, sipping coffee while the world outside still yawned and stretched into daylight. My notifications buzzed, one from Susan, a mom from my daughter's high school friend group. We weren't close, but we exchanged polite updates at bake sales and parent-teacher nights, the kind of relationship rooted more in mutual proximity than actual friendship. Her message was short, just a screenshot and a single sentence. Thought you should see this. I tapped the image, not sure what to expect, and then I saw the thread. Her name at the top of a group chat I hadn't known existed. A circle of friends, all familiar names, teenagers I'd known since they were 12, now older, louder, sharper around the edges. The conversation was from the night before. It wasn't meant for me, but it might as well have been. She's so annoying. My mom won't stop nagging. Mine either. I asked to take the car and she gave me a speech like I'm 5. Then came my daughter's reply. At least you're not living with Margaret Thatcher. Mine's obsessed with rules. I borrowed the car and now she's threatening to sell it LOL. OMG. So dramatic. Controlling much? Can't wait until you get your own ride. Then she can cry into her car seat. There were laughing emojis, thumbs up, heart reacts. I sat there staring at the screen, the words blurring for a moment, not from tears, those didn't come, but from the slow, numbing disbelief that settles in your chest like winter frost on a window pane. I reread the messages, even though I didn't need to. They were seared into me now. Not just the content, but the tone, the easy mockery, the smug confidence of someone who believed they could say anything behind your back and you'd never know. And what struck me the most wasn't the betrayal. It was the casualness of it. How flippantly she spoke about me. How comfortably she stripped me of any dignity in front of her friends. I wasn't a person in that thread. I was a punchline, an obstacle, a caricature of motherhood she wore like a badge of inconvenience. I didn't respond to Susan. I just closed my phone and sat with it. The truth. Raw, ugly, undeniable. It didn't make me angry so much as it made me still. Silent in a way that felt different than before. Because this wasn't just about the car anymore. It wasn't about curfews or rules or who paid for gas. It was about who she was becoming. Who I was allowing her to become under my roof, on my watch. There's a point in every parent's life when love has to make room for consequence. Mine had just arrived, and she had no idea it was already parked at the edge of the driveway. I didn't plan to run into Marianne at the grocery store. I'd only gone in for coffee and paper towels, trying to walk off the weight of what I'd read that morning, still holding those screenshots in the back of my mind like a bitter aftertaste I couldn't spit out. She spotted me in the produce aisle, her cart already half full, sunglasses perched in her hair, and a half frown softening when she saw my face. "Margaret," she said, with that gentle caution people use when they sense something's wrong before they know what it is. "Do you have a second?" We hadn't talked in months. Not really. A few passing nods at school fundraisers, a shared laugh during a neighborhood meeting about parking issues. But there was history there, enough for her to know my daughter's name, and enough for her to choose her words carefully now. "I wanted to reach out," she began, and I knew exactly what she was about to say before she finished. "Look, I saw that group chat too. Emily left her phone out and, well, I don't think she meant for me to see it, but I did. And I saw what your daughter wrote about you." There was a pause. Not out of hesitation, but respect, giving me space to decide if I wanted to acknowledge it or pretend I hadn't already been cut by the same blade. I gave her a small nod. "I saw it too," I said. "Susan sent it to me." Marianne's face softened. "I'm sorry," she said. "You don't deserve that." It was such a simple statement, but it hit hard. Not because I needed validation, but because I hadn't realized how much I'd started to accept the disrespect as normal. Like it came with the territory of raising a teenager. Like my boundaries were up for negotiation. "She's not a bad kid," I found myself saying automatically, the mother's instinct to defend even when you're hurt deep still pulsing through me. "No," Marianne agreed. "She's not. But she's been allowed to treat you like someone who doesn't matter. And if you let it go on too long, she'll believe that's love. That it's conditional. That it bends." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "I've been trying to give her space," I said, quieter now. "Let her figure things out." "And she's been using that space to rewrite the rules," she replied gently. "You can love your daughter and still put your foot down. In fact, sometimes it's the only way they learn." We stood there for a moment, two mothers among apples and kale, not talking about produce, but about parenting and pain and the blurry line between giving grace and being taken for granted. By the time we parted, I knew what I needed to do. Not out of spite, not even out of anger, but out of the firm, quiet conviction that love without limits isn't love. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. The irony didn't escape me. I had spent years teaching her to stand on her own 2 feet. I celebrated the first time she tied her shoes without help, the first time she marched into school with her backpack bouncing behind her, not once looking back. I encouraged her to speak up, to advocate for herself, to question things that didn't feel right. I raised her to be strong, not silent, independent, not compliant. But somewhere along the way, she had taken the lessons I gave her in love and twisted them into entitlement. I thought about that as I stood in her room the next afternoon. She was out again, probably at Emily's or wherever it was they spent their hours talking about how exhausting their mothers were. Her room was its usual mess. Laundry half folded, makeup brushes crusted with last week's glitter, a mug of something long curdled on the nightstand. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even touching anything. I was just standing there, surrounded by the little world she believed she ruled. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I belonged in it. Not as a guide, not even as a presence, just as someone she used for infrastructure. The independence I'd encouraged had become her argument against responsibility. "I'm old enough to make my own decisions," she'd say whenever I pushed back. Old enough? Yes. Responsible enough? That was the question she never let me finish. When she came home that evening, she barely looked at me. Just dropped her bag by the stairs, eyes on her phone, and muttered, "I'm starving." I waited. Nothing else. No greeting. No apology. Just the expectation that something warm would magically appear in the kitchen. That I would feed her like a vending machine. Insert attitude. Receive dinner. "You're welcome to make something," I said, my voice steady, measured. She blinked up from her phone, startled. "I've had a long day." "So have I." She huffed, muttering something under her breath that I chose not to ask her to repeat. Instead, I turned back to the sink and continued washing the dishes I didn't dirty. It hit me then. She didn't think of herself as someone borrowing my life. She thought of me as orbiting hers. I had taught her self-reliance, but never shown her the boundary where self-reliance ends and respect begins. I had created a daughter who could survive without me, but who expected me to always be there anyway. Who took the car, the time, the silence, the meals, the emotional labor, and assumed it all replenished itself without cost. But everything had a cost, and the bill was due. I didn't say it out loud, not yet. But the thought had already taken root, solid and growing. She could have her independence. She wanted freedom? Fine. But she wouldn't get to use mine to build it. Not anymore. Because I had taught her to stand alone. Now it was time to let her try. It was a Sunday afternoon when I noticed it. The kind of quiet, overcast day that makes you think about starting over. Clearing out drawers, rearranging bookshelves, making sense of things left scattered too long. She had dropped the car off late the night before, keys tossed carelessly onto the hallway table, no words exchanged. Just the slam of the front door and the sound of footsteps heading upstairs. I'd let it be. I was tired of chasing after answers she didn't think I deserved. But that next day, something pulled me to the driveway. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the look in her eyes lately. That thin, distant glaze she wore like armor. I opened the driver's side door, already bracing for more fast food wrappers or a trail of receipts she'd never offer to pay. What I wasn't expecting was the smell. It hit me before I even sat down. Smoke. Not the faint, clinging scent of someone who'd walked through it, but the stale, lingering kind that settles into upholstery and doesn't leave. I looked around slowly, heart pounding with a strange, bitter rhythm. And then I saw it. On the passenger seat. A small, ugly crater, blackened at the edges. No bigger than a dime. A cigarette burn. It wasn't just damage. It was carelessness turned into evidence. A mark left behind by someone who had borrowed something without thought and treated it like trash. I sat there for a long moment, staring at it, my hands resting in my lap. My throat felt tight, not with sadness, not even with anger, but with the hollow finality of realization. This wasn't going to get better. Not with another conversation. Not with a pleading lecture about respect or maturity. She had shown me, again and again, exactly who she was when handed responsibility. And I had been the one ignoring the signs, sweeping up behind her, hoping each mess would be the last. When I finally went back inside, I didn't slam doors or demand answers. I didn't ask her why she thought it was okay. I didn't ask who she was with, or whether she knew how much it would cost to fix. I didn't say anything at all. I simply sat down at the kitchen table and started looking up used car values, trade-in offers, private listings. Something calm and quiet settled over me then. The kind of calm that comes after a decision has finally been made. It wasn't about the burn. Not really. It was about the scorch mark it left on everything I'd given her. Every ride, every key, every silent forgiveness. And now, there it was. Blackened fabric. Proof that I had let her disrespect me one time too many. She thought it was her car now. Her freedom. Her extension of self. But it never was. And the moment I saw that burn, I knew it never would be again. I didn't tell her I was going. I didn't feel the need to justify it. Not anymore. By Monday morning, the cigarette burn had become more than a mark on a seat. It was a symbol, the final punctuation in a long sentence of disrespect. So I gathered the paperwork I kept neatly in a file labeled Auto, slipped it into my bag, and drove the car one last time. No ceremony, no music, just the hum of the engine and the kind of silence that follows a clean break. The dealership wasn't far. Just across town, tucked between a row of coffee shops and chain stores. The kind of place you drive past 100 times before ever having a reason to go in. The salesman was polite, professional, and, thankfully, not too chatty. I told him what I wanted, a trade-in evaluation and a simple sale. No upsells, no replacements, just closure. He walked the lot with me, clipboard in hand, nodding thoughtfully as he inspected the car. He didn't comment on the small dent near the back fender, or the worn tires, or the interior that still carried the scent of someone else's carelessness. But when he saw the cigarette burn, he hesitated. "That'll affect the resale value," he said, almost apologetically. I nodded. "I know." He gave me a number. Lower than I'd hoped, but more than I expected. I didn't haggle. It felt right somehow, to take exactly what it was worth now. Not what it had been when I first bought it. Not what it had meant to me before the boundaries blurred. I signed the paperwork in a small office that smelled like leather and coffee. It took 10 minutes. Maybe less. When I handed over the keys, I felt a small flicker in my chest. Not regret, but something like nostalgia. A goodbye to a version of myself that had tried too hard to make things work. As I left, I looked back once. The car sat there, unremarkable, waiting for someone else. And I didn't feel a single tug of doubt. On the way home, I rode in silence. No radio, no rush. Just the soft hum of traffic around me as I let the truth settle in fully. I had given my daughter every chance to show maturity, every opportunity to rise to the level of the trust I had placed in her. But she hadn't. She hadn't even tried. And so, I had done what she never thought I would. I stopped waiting. By the time I walked through the front door, the dealership receipt folded in my purse, I felt lighter than I had in months. The house was quiet. She wasn't home yet. And when she finally returned, she would find an empty driveway and learn that some lessons don't come with warnings, just consequences. She came through the front door around 6, the way she always did, half distracted, mid-text, expecting the world to still be where she left it. I was at the sink rinsing rice for dinner, listening to the quiet click of her shoes on the hardwood, the rustle of her bag dropping by the door, the phone tossed onto the console table with that careless thud. And then came the pause. It lasted longer than usual. She opened the door again. I could hear it, hinges creaking, the slap of her palm against the frame, as if maybe she hadn't looked hard enough the first time. Another beat of silence. Then the door shut again, louder this time. "Where's the car?" She was standing in the hallway, arms folded, eyebrows raised like I'd hidden it behind the house as some sort of test. I turned off the faucet, shook the water from my hands, and dried them slowly on a kitchen towel before answering. "I sold it." Her head tilted. "You what?" "I sold the car," I said again, this time without pause, without apology. "This morning." There was a silence so sharp it felt like glass. She blinked, the disbelief crawling slowly across her face. "You're joking." "I'm not." She let out a sharp, stunned laugh, as if trying to force the scene back into the realm of absurdity. "You sold my car?" "No," I said calmly. "I sold my car, the one I paid for, the one I insured, the one I maintained, the one you treated like it owed you something." Her mouth opened, closed. She stared at me like I'd just shattered something she hadn't realized could break. "You didn't even tell me." "I didn't owe you that conversation," I said, and the truth of it landed like stone. "Not after everything." She stood there, arms slowly dropping to her sides, the weight of the moment sinking in as she looked out through the window again, as if the car might magically reappear if she stared hard enough. "I needed that car," she said, her voice suddenly smaller. "I had plans." I nodded. "Then you'll need to start making your own arrangements, just like I have." For years the silence stretched again, but this time it was heavy with something different. Recognition. Maybe even shame. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't throw her usual barbed remarks. She just stood there, looking at the empty spot in the driveway, and for the first time in months, I think she saw it clearly. Not just the absence of the car, but the absence of my patience. I went back to the stove, the rice now simmering gently, the smell of garlic beginning to warm the room. Behind me, she turned and walked upstairs without a word. And I let her go. Because sometimes, silence teaches louder than any lecture ever could. And this time, she was finally listening. The next morning, she barely looked at me. She came downstairs dressed for class, hair pulled back, makeup lighter than usual, as if uncertainty had dulled the sharpness she usually wore like armor. She poured herself cereal in silence, the clink of the spoon against the bowl the only sound between us. I sipped my coffee, watching her without watching her, waiting to see if she'd speak first. She didn't. Not right away. But I could feel it building behind her eyes, the calculation, the quiet anger, the realization that something had shifted and it wasn't shifting back. After a few spoonfuls, she finally asked, "Did you really have to sell it?" I set my mug down, gently, deliberately. "No," I said. "I didn't have to. I chose to." She scoffed under her breath. "Over a stupid burn in the seat?" I looked at her then. Really looked. "No," I said again. "Not over the burn. Not over one thing. Over everything. Over the silence, the disrespect, the way you've treated me like I'm just here to fund your freedom." "It was just a car," she said, too quickly, the way people talk when they're trying to minimize something they secretly know mattered more than they're willing to admit. I nodded slowly. "That's exactly the problem." She set her spoon down and leaned back in her chair, arms folded, the same defensive posture she always took when the conversation veered into uncomfortable truth. "You talk about it like it was sacred. It's just transportation." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "It was a boundary," I said. "A line. One that you crossed too many times without ever looking back." She rolled her eyes but didn't interrupt. That alone felt like progress. I stood and walked to the sink, rinsing my cup as I continued. "That car wasn't about wheels and mileage. It was about trust. And you treated it like a given, not a gift." For the first time in weeks, she didn't snap back. She didn't deflect. She just sat there, arms still folded, but quieter now. More still. "So what now?" she asked, voice low. "I just walk everywhere?" I turned, drying my hands on a dish towel. "For now, yes. You find rides. You take the bus. You figure it out like I did before I ever owned a car." She looked down at the table, and for a second, she wasn't angry. She was just young, and faced with consequence. I didn't offer her a ride. I didn't suggest solutions. I let her sit with the discomfort. The weight of realizing that something she assumed would always be there had vanished because she never stopped to appreciate it. And as she stood, picked up her backpack, and walked out the door, I saw the hesitation in her step. It was just a car, until it wasn't. Until it was a turning point. One she never saw coming. She came home late again. I heard the front door creak open just after 10, the sound of her keys hitting the bowl by the entryway, the shuffle of her steps across the hardwood. No slammed doors this time. No clipped remarks or exaggerated sighs. Just silence. I stayed upstairs, lights dimmed, listening as she moved through the house like someone suddenly uncertain of where they stood. The kitchen light flicked on. Then the pause. Then nothing. I knew when she found it. I had written the letter that morning, after she left for class, the front door closing behind her with the soft finality of a lesson still sinking in. The house had been quiet, still heavy with the tension of the day before, but something about the quiet felt different. Like it was holding space for something necessary. Not revenge, not anger, just truth. So I sat down at the kitchen table with a blank piece of paper and wrote what I hadn't been able to say all at once. I told her the car wasn't just a car. I told her it was mine. Paid for with years of sacrifice and careful planning. Bought after a season of my life when everything felt uncertain, when I'd had to start over with more bills than hope. I told her how proud I was the day I drove it home. Not because of what it looked like, but because of what it meant. Independence. Stability. Something solid I had built for myself. I told her I was happy to share that with her. That offering her the keys had been a gesture of love, of trust, of belief in the person I hoped she was becoming. And then I told her what she already knew, deep down. That trust isn't infinite. That taking something for granted too many times turns privilege into expectation, and expectation into resentment. I told her the burn in the passenger seat wasn't what hurt the most. It was the way she didn't think it mattered. The way she never thought to say sorry or ask how she could fix it. The way she assumed I'd be there to clean it up, again. I didn't threaten her. I didn't punish her. I didn't ask for anything. I just wrote, in plain language, what she needed to hear. Love does not mean unlimited chances. Respect is not a given. It's a choice you make every day. And when someone shows you they're not ready to handle your trust, you have every right to stop handing it over. When she found the letter, she didn't come upstairs. She didn't knock on my door or shout through the house. She just sat with it, I assume, in the same chair where I'd written it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to follow up. Because the words were enough. And this time, they had nowhere to hide. The next morning, I heard her leave earlier than usual. No request for a ride. No door cracked open to ask if she could borrow the spare. Just the soft rhythm of her footsteps, a pause at the entryway, and the click of the front door closing behind her. I glanced out the window from upstairs and saw her walking down the driveway, hood up against the morning chill, backpack pulled high on her shoulders, earbuds in, but her posture different. Less certain, a little smaller. It wasn't the first time she'd walked somewhere, but it was the first time she had to. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't watch her like a victor surveying a battlefield. I just stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, and let the moment be what it was. Necessary. It had taken a cigarette burn and a stack of small betrayals to get us here. But here we were. She had been asked for nothing more than respect, and she'd handed me silence in return. Now silence was what she walked with. The letter was still on the table when I came downstairs. Folded. Unmoved. But I knew she had read it. I could see the crease where the paper had been pressed between her fingers too tightly, probably held longer than she meant to. It was the first time I had put everything in writing, and it had left no room for misunderstanding. No tone to argue with. No raised voice to react against. Just truth, laid bare. That week passed differently than the ones before. She didn't slam doors. She didn't shout through dinner conversations or disappear for entire evenings without a word. She asked where I kept the laundry detergent. She emptied the dishwasher. She texted me when she'd be late. These were small things, inconsequential in isolation, but together they formed something new, something quieter, more intentional. Not a full apology. Not yet. But the beginning of one. I knew better than to rush it. Change doesn't arrive like thunder. It trickles in, slow and awkward, often silent. And maybe that was what she needed most. Not another lecture, not more warnings, but space to feel the friction of her own choices, to walk in the consequences instead of watching me carry them. On Thursday, she came home damp from the rain, her hoodie clinging to her arms, her shoes leaving a trail across the tile. She dropped her bag, took a breath, and stood in the kitchen doorway. "I got caught in it," she said simply, brushing wet strands of hair from her forehead. I nodded. "I saw." She hesitated, then looked at me. Not past me, not through me. At me. "I get it now. About the car. About everything." I didn't say, "I know." I didn't need to. She was learning, step by step. And sometimes, the only way to grow up is to walk through the rain. Looking back, selling the car wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about reclaiming something I'd let slip away piece by piece. My boundaries, my self-respect, my voice as a mother who deserved to be heard, not just tolerated. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it because I finally understood that protecting her couldn't come at the cost of abandoning myself. She thought I overreacted. She thought I was controlling. But what she learned, slowly, painfully, and without shortcuts, was that trust has weight, and if you drop it too many times, someone will stop picking it up for you. She walks more now, takes the bus, sometimes gets a ride from a friend. And on the days it rains, she packs an umbrella without needing to be told. We don't talk about the car anymore, but the silence between us has changed. It's no longer cold or bitter. It's something closer to mutual understanding. She's learning that independence isn't handed to you, it's earned. That freedom is a privilege, not a default. And that when someone gives you something valuable, you take care of it. Whether it's a vehicle, or trust, or the quiet daily efforts of a mother who never stopped showing up. And me? I don't miss the car. I miss the version of us I thought we were. But I'm learning to let that go too. In its place, we're building something new. Slower. Less certain. But maybe stronger this time. Built not on convenience or assumption, but on earned ground. Thanks for spending time with this story. If it resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone else may need to hear it too. Watch another real-life journey by clicking on the left and subscribe so you never miss what comes next.